Social media has emerged as one of the key battlegrounds in the information war currently being fought over Ukraine. But how effective are the armies of online activists which the conflict has unleashed? We've been joined today in the Ukraine Today newsroom by Luc Chenier, Canadian advertising executive who recently launched a Thunderclap social media campaign to raise awareness about the plight of Nadia Savchenko. Luc, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.
Can you tell us a little bit about the campaign and why you chose to use Thunderclap?
Thunderclap in general is something that we've been aware of for about 2 years, but we tried it 1 year ago in terms learning about it. But the reason why we learned it is that rather than just sending out emails and just talking and griping about how we feel, in general, we wanted to get the entire community around the world working. How Thunderclap works is that one person supports, but then he donates his entire social media collection, basically, of people. So if I, like myself, I have 1,300 people. So if I support it, 1,300 people will see my cause of what I've done, basically all about Nadia. So this was the initial reason why we chose Thunderclap. The second reason why we chose Nadia is because we understand the situation that she's in. We were having a long night discussion one night on how could we help, and we felt quite helpless, much like she does with her hunger strike. And we felt the only way that we could raise the awareness of what she's going through is pretty much by raising the awareness around the world. And the only way that we could do it is via Thunderclap. While there's Twitter, which is fantastic, and I know Euromaidan PR has done an excellent job of raising for the Million Twitter campaign, which we started working with them, and they were a big supporter of this. Myself and a Canadian called Bill Pawlowski in Canada, which was an instrumental in this campaign, basically we dug down deep and we actually started activating on this, and it turned out much bigger than we ever expected.
Now, a lot of people have mobilized on social media over the last year, promoting Ukrainian issues, promoting awareness about Ukraine, and you see a lot of this. Any social media user will be very familiar with seeing these hashtags and these campaigns. But how effective is it as a tool? I mean, does it have any impact on policy making in the West? Does it have any impact on Russia, on public opinion?
There's no real way. I mean, being an advertising person, I'm a very big analytics person. I like results and not just noise. And right now, quite a lot of social media is noise. But as I say, the more noise you make, the more people actually pay attention. If it's quiet, nobody will know about it. So my attitude is make more noise.
Is there a way of quantifying it?
There is multiple ways of quantifying, but not when it's for campaigns such as we did. Our job was to raise awareness, basically, and this was the main issue. If you're talking about advertising, then that's a whole different ballgame, because now you can quantify the purchases acquired and the whole bit. But this is a person who's in prison, who's now, I think on day 52 or 53, I'm not sure, on a hunger strike, and as she feels helpless, we feel helpless as well, and our only way is to raise the awareness. So there's no real way of quantifying it until she's released.
With social media, a lot of the campaigning that goes on tends to be via networks of existing friends, yes, associates, people you follow, etc. Does that not lead us down the road where there's a danger of preaching to the converted, where you get people sort of ghettoized in their own opinion groups?
In a certain way, yes, but what's different about Thunderclap is that, like myself, you're on my Facebook. So you and me are in our own little ghetto, as you would say. But the point is that I have 1,000+ people on my network that you don't know. And that's the same way as I know you have much more people that I don't know on your network. So if we can mix the messages and Thunderclap it to much more people, then several thousand more people will know that you and me do not know, and we're not part of our social network, that we're not part of our overall group, as we call it. So I view the Thunderclap, one person sees it, then it thunderclaps to another person has another 1,000 people, and another 1,000 people, and 10,000. We had one person who had 77,000 people. Now, I don't know 77,000 people personally, but imagine the impact that that has. So, and we ended up getting, I think the last number was, we almost had 500,000 people. We were at 306,741. If I saw, we could have been much bigger, but it was not bad for 12 days. So there's more than 250,000 people on the planet now who know about Nadia.
The social media campaigns have taken a very prominent role over the last year, as I say, in Ukraine. And I think a lot of people have felt empowered, or at least they've been able to somehow contribute by getting involved in these campaigns. But can social media platforms compete with traditional media? Can they be loud enough to be heard over the noise created by television, by the printed press, by the established brands?
How I see it as being an advertising person, but also being a consumer, is what I call myself, a world consumer, is that the traditional media speaks one way. Social media is a conversation, and that's something that traditional media cannot compete with. Traditional media can only start a conversation, but it can't continue it. Social media starts a conversation and continues the conversation. So this is where it's a little bit more empowering, while traditional media has the power and the gloss of making more impact initially, but it can't continue. That's my personal view on it.
I think one of the reasons why there's been such an upsurge in social media activity is because it's accessible. Anyone can do it, anyone can sign up, anyone
Absolutely.
can open an account. But with that accessibility also comes a lack of, it doesn't have the credibility tests you get with the mainstream media.
Absolutely.
One thing we've seen a lot of is fake news and faked reports, and social media has been shown to be very susceptible to that. And when you're launching campaigns or approaching these sort of issues, how can you avoid getting lumped into that package or avoiding the suspicions that are aroused?
You can't. The only thing that you can do as a person who has the right idea and what they want to do is to get the facts straight, to respect who your audience is and to respect what the conversation is. It's much like going to a bar when you're speaking to a person. You can say a lot of stories that just make no sense, or you can actually have an intelligent conversation. It all depends. And this is how you have to approach social media. You basically have to respect people. This is the whole point.
I mean, in terms of winning their credit,
Absolutely. And people now are so bombarded daily with, I mean, especially with the Ukraine news. I know everyone has the best intentions, but there is a lot of noise going on, and there's a lot of trolls, and as they call them, and there's a lot of people saying this and that. But the reality is that you have to get very clear and factual points on what it is, and people are smart enough. The right people who you want to speak to and have a good conversation will understand and respect you for that.
Is there a danger that these trolls, as you mentioned, could kill the social media?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is their job, isn't it? Their job is to change the subject in order to change the conversation, is what I call it. It's to change the subject in general in order to create a new conversation that makes no sense. That is their one and only goal. And as long as the facts are very hard and very straight, this is what's going to make a big difference.
So what would be your advice if people encounter this sort of spoiling tactics? To ignore them, to confront them, to...
I wouldn't confront them because it's like confronting a bully. I mean, what's the point in that? My attitude is that if you see something, you can call them out, but then you're just being sucked in, is what I call it, into a larger argument. Have you seen on some websites how one person will say one quote and then there'll be 60 new quotes under that fighting? And it gets to a point that it has absolutely nothing to do with the actual subject that was talked about. My point is that smart people will understand what the message is and don't get sucked in by people who are trying to derail this clear and important message.
To touch on the language issue, obviously you're coming from a English-speaking background, so you have an advantage.
Well, French as well, but it's good.
Okay. So yeah, Anglo-French linguistic background.
Yes.
Obviously that gives you enormous reach advantages. A lot of the dialogue, a lot of the debate that's being had on social media, especially here in Ukraine, is by definition in Ukrainian and Russian.
Yes.
How limiting is that, and how important do you think it is for people who want to get involved here in Ukraine to try and speak in English or, for example, French, Spanish?
Yeah, I believe that our goal here was to tell the world what was going on, because everybody in Ukraine knows exactly what Nadia is going through. They see it day in, day out. They feel for her, and everyone knows what it is. Our goal was to reach the international community so that this cause in Ukraine would not become another Syria, in a way that while Syria was on top of the news and it's still countless atrocities going there, now it's like it's just normal day, like Palestine and Jerusalem, it's normal day. And right now Ukraine is on the risk of falling into that category unless something big happens. So we wanted to bring awareness to this, that this is a serious issue and it's a great travesty. And our job was to start the conversation so that everyone would know.
The Savchenko case has attracted a lot of international attention, and I think has captured to an extent, has captured the imagination. A female fighter pilot abducted, held in Russia. Yes. It has all the ingredients that the media often look for, unfortunately, in stories.
Yes.
Would it be fair, to take a cynic's approach? Is that why that you chose her? Because it's sellable, or is that because
yes
you think
and no? Yes and no, and I've always been a very honest guy, and that's been one of my biggest faults, is I'm very direct. I would say that I chose it. I didn't choose it. Lots of people were talking about it, and I just said, listen, I know how to make a Thunderclap, and I would like to at least put my 2 cents into this, much like with the Canadian flag, as you remember last year, with changing the Canadian flag into Ukrainian colors. That was my little way of saying that Canada was with Ukraine. But in general, I chose it basically because it was important, and what I was afraid about is that it would take somebody to die in prison by themselves in order to teach us all a lesson in humanity. And the more the days are gone, the more that I'm fearing that that's exactly what's going to happen, and she's going to become a martyr. And we're going to say, I wish I would have done something. At least now, more than 250,300 people have stood up and helped basically to say, no, this is important to us.
Thanks very much for joining us, Luke. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure.
This has been Peter Dickinson in the Ukraine Today newsroom with Luke Chenier. Now back to the news.